It's a radical thing in today's culture for a young man to reject what the culture tells him will make him happy in favor of what God is showing him will truly make him happy. These are the honest conversations of the men discerning the priesthood in the Diocese of Nashville, seminarians learning what it means to follow Christ's call.
You're going to have to interact with the people, and you're going to have to knock on their door and be like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Are you okay? Everything's going on?
Dealing with the challenges.
Sometimes I was like, boy, I wish I would have paid more attention in that class. I'd be able to answer this question a little bit better. Let me get back to you.
Finding the beauty.
At least for us in our seminarian time, we have to do papers. We have to do all these things, but always create some times where you're going to spend time with the Lord.
This is the Nash Vocations Podcast, adapted for Nashville Catholic Radio.
Welcome to the Nash Vocations Podcast. My name is Tyler Starkey, and I have with me here
James Grossheim,
Seth Reed,
and David Lee.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being with me. Today, we are going to be talking about relationships with women. Very interesting topic. It's one that, oddly enough, we have to think quite a bit about in our line of work.
It's true. Because most of the parish staff you work with are going to be women.
It's true.
I mean, half of your congregation will be.
Half of the congregation is going to be women.
Yeah. And most of your daily mass crowd is
that's right.
80% women, too. So,
but again, like the people you work closely with, your secretary is 99%.
99%.
Probably going to be a woman.
I've always heard it's those little old ladies who pray the rosary in the morning that keep
Mm-hmm.
the church from falling off its axis. So we really, really need them.
We also have a lot of people that end up having questions for us about seminarians and women priests working with women, or just having any sort of relationship with women in general. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Especially wanted to talk on some of the more common questions that we get. So especially new guys who are coming into seminary or just thinking about seminary. It's a new kind of way of life. It's a new kind of way of living. So they had some questions kind of moving from high school or working out in the world and going into the seminary itself. So some of the things that they asked, things like dating. So I want to pose this one to you all. Is dating allowed in seminary?
Well, back in the 70s.
back I did hear crazy stories. Back in the 60s and 70s.
It was encouraged.
They always had this basketball tournament up at Mundelein in Chicago. And I think this was back in the 70s. They would actually show up to the tournament
with girlfriends.
Yep. I was like, no. Today that's, it's unthinkable. Like you'd be at a seminary in a heartbeat. But
so obviously today, no. You are in seminary to discern your vocation to the priesthood, not to marriage.
You can think of your time in seminary as you're dating the church and discerning a vocation with the church. So if you were also dating a woman at that time, that'd be basically like dating two girls. Like you can't discern both those things at the same time.
Yeah. And one of the things that we had always talked about was there is there's something disingenuous about it. There's something almost like cheating. You kind of mentioned the idea of it's like dating two different girls. I mean, it's entirely true because you're not. The idea of seminary is that it requires this whole person. It requires this complete dedication, and if you're splitting that, then you're not being honest with either one or both of the parties here. You're unable to give yourself entirely, and you can't discern that way. But I mean, if you're not allowed to date, and you're kind of in this sequestered environment, you have to cut off all contact with all women.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's what you just have to do. Is how the church works.
Delete them from your phone.
No.
Just get out of it. Yeah.
We're obviously joking.
I mean, there is kind of a natural detachment that happens from going into seminary. Because the reality is, every day in seminary, you're not coming across girls in your day-to-day. Unless you're in college seminary, it's a little different than if you're in major theology.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a lot of our college seminarians will go to school with other girls. It's a co-ed kind of environment. But for me, pre-theology in New Orleans was completely disguised. And so one of the things actually was pretty shocking with coming back on your summer assignment when you come back to the diocese and you get back into the parish, you start seeing more women than normal. And that was always kind of a shock, kind of adjustment change for me. So I think seminary kind of naturally lends to that detachment, but you're obviously going to keep up those friendships you had before seminary too. Yeah.
I think too, and James can speak to this because we both went to St. Joseph's Seminary College. But one of the ways it was explained to us, and I don't know necessarily that I agree with it now, but back then it made sense. Jesus had, who was his closest people? Peter, James, and John. That was his inner circle. Who was outside of that? The other 12, or whatever it is. I'm bad at math, so whatever. The other guys. And then outside of that was the 72. And then outside of that, that was where Mary Magdalene and Martha and the other Mary and the other women were. So you never have as close friends women, or even in that outer group women, or even in that outer group women. But having been in theology and, like David said, coming back to the diocese and interacting with, I don't think that's necessarily a good way to think about it. Because, in my opinion, one of the people you're going to rely on the most is going to be your secretary. And again, they're probably going to be a woman. And like, I would think that relationship, they're going to be your friend too. Like, they're going to be the one you probably confide in sometimes. And so that's going to be a very close relationship. Now, of course, priests, you have to toe the line of that relationship. You have to have good boundaries and stuff like that. But she's going to be your friend. Or at least I would think that the priest would probably want her to be his friend.
Yeah. And that's sometimes a difficult thing is I mean, we're people. We need friends. We need friendship, and it's nice and it's important for us, especially having those friendships with priests, and your brother priests, the people that you're going to be working in this ministry field with. But on the idea of friendship with women, it's going to come up unless you're just trying to keep every woman you kind of come across at arm's length, which is not healthy. No. It is not okay. How do you approach good, holy friendships with women? I know for me, I have a very good friend who's a woman. We get along great. We still visit with each other. We really do get along. She's one of my best friends. But for us, we've definitely realized that a good, healthy friendship especially needs to have that good Christian foundation, a good Christian understanding of, why are we friends? Like, what are we doing here? We're working together for something. We're all part of this church, this group, striving for holiness. And I think that just like any other friendship, you need that foundation of just wanting to be holy, and that idea of love, of loving the other person for their own good.
Right. That's a good litmus test for me too, is whose needs are being met in this relationship. Is it my needs or the other person's needs? Right. And if you're primarily in there to feel, self-gratified, to feel, like you're getting more than you're giving, I think that it could be a dangerous line. Because especially with women, you do have to be aware of like this emotional intimacy can very easily lead to this kind of physical attraction. Yep. And so I'm always kind of testing my own motives and intentions and asking the Lord to purify my desires, purify my heart, and to help me to see women as He sees women in an appropriate way in which we're going to be living out this chaste celibacy. So
yeah, I think both of which are hitting at is just proper boundaries. You have to have proper boundaries with everybody. We have to have proper boundaries with ourselves. And again, it's even more important to have proper boundaries with the women who you consider your friends or who consider you friends, because you don't want to have that friendship and then start going, I could go hang out with my brother priest, but today I'm going to go see this particular woman. Because
right, it's okay because it's my ministry. I'm making her holy. Exactly. We're going to be saints together, and so you can end up in trouble really easily.
Exactly. So. One of those very simple. I mean, this is foundational boundaries. Is we both have to have the same understanding of what this friendship is. And what our roles are in the church and in our friendships. Like, I'm a seminarian. We have to be on the same page about our boundaries in that relationship, in that friendship.
I think seminary is a good time to learn this process, because one of the strange things I've experienced in seminary is before you go into seminary, you interact with women in a particular way. You're like, okay, I'm open to a relationship, maybe I can be a little more flirtatious, and then you go into seminary, and then a lot of times it's, not until once you become a priest that you're back out in the world full time, and you're like, okay, I know I can't, interact the way I did with the women before seminary, but how do I actually do this as a priest or as a seminarian? And
you start second guessing yourself too. It's like, I made this joke. Was that? Should I not have made a joke? Like,
can I say that?
Can I say that? Is that okay? I would have said it with my brothers, but can I say it with her? I don't know. Is that okay?
And I think a lot of seminarians, you see saints and examples of these holy friendships, like between John Paul II and I think he had a close friend who was a woman. And then a lot of seminarians reading this book about Saint Therese of Lisieux and her letters back and forth with Maurice, who was this other French seminarian. And so we hold these ideals of like, okay, like this is what I want my relationships to be like. But the reality is we're still very far away from that level of sanctity and that emotional maturity a lot of the times. So even though we have these ideals, we had to realistically be, okay, here I am, here and now. Okay, maybe I can get to that one day, but there might be some adjustment process in between. So.
I'm not St. Francis, and she's not St. Clair.
There you go. Right. Yeah, you want to try to avoid that kind of feeling.
Yes.
But I think James was right. Like, having this understanding, like, I'm a seminarian now. That's important. I mean, for me, especially, like, if I'm out, especially with someone who's one of my friends who's a woman. If we're going out for lunch or something, I make sure. Just for me personally, one of the things I do, I make sure I'm in clerics. I'm wearing my collar. I'm out in public. It's for me. My assumption always was it is better for me to be out at lunch with a woman in my clerics than to be in street clothes. And someone who knows me sees me, not in my clerics with a woman. It was always it's the better view. But that's, I don't know. It always feels like there's a little bit more of, I don't know, precautions, a little bit more stuff that we have to kind of do. Another hurdle or two that has to be jumped. Having friendships, especially as a seminarian, with women, it feels like there's just a few more hurdles that kind of have to be jumped for that.
Yeah, the other thing that I like to keep in mind too is we're all, on a basic level as men, we have this natural call to marriage.
Yes.
And so it's going to be easy to be attracted to women and to, want to hang out around them and to, obviously, to be fathers is a desire in our hearts. And as seminarians, we're discerning the supernatural call that we think God is giving us to kind of forego this natural desire for marriage and to serve Him in a unique and special way. And so that natural desire doesn't go away just because you enter seminary. Yeah. What you're asking is, do I have that supernatural grace to live celibacy well, to live as a single, chaste man? And that's the thing that we're trying to figure out as seminarians.
And that can sometimes be difficult, especially if you're working in a parish. You're outside of the seminary. We come home for the summers. We're doing various ministerial work. We're doing stuff in the diocese with people. It's one of those things, like, if you're back in your diocese and you meet a very cute girl who's around your age, she prays all the time, she's at daily mass, very holy. It's very easy to start thinking like, oh, do I have a crush on this person? And then, not to mention the reverse side of that. You've got women who are going to see you, this holy man who deeply loves God and is someone who really cares about them, and they might start developing feelings, for you. So how do you navigate those waters if you think like, maybe I'm developing a crush on someone, maybe I'm starting to really like this person, or I find myself going out of my way to be near them or around them? Kind of navigate that. How do you think?
We actually had a class on this at St. Margaret.
Really?
Yeah.
A whole semester.
Well, not a whole class. We have this thing called J-term where where we have like a week period before classes. It's actually 2-week period before classes actually start.
Oh, cool.
And we just talked about celibacy. And so in the celibacy talk, Brother John Mark, who gave us this talk/class, he was kind of like, you have to have a reason to be celibate. You have to have a reason. Otherwise, get married. That's what he said, basically. Like, you have to want to give your life to Christ. You have to want to have Christ as your intimate friend and lover. It's kind of weird to say as a man, but it's true. You have to have reasons to be celibate. If you don't have those reasons, then if you find a woman attractive and you get a crush on her, or she gets a crush on you, you're probably going to try to pursue that.
And it's bound to happen. Like, priests and seminarians will tell you, like,
Yeah.
Sometime throughout your formation or sometimes as a priest, you are going to start feeling attracted to women. So it's not an if, it's a when.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, okay, is my life rooted in prayer to the point that I know I'm the Lord's and the Lord's mine, and I have this confidence in our identity, in our relationship that I can, persevere through this this kind of phase of my life, because it's bound to happen.
And I guess it depends too how strong the emotions are. Like, is it just like, I think she's pretty and I kind of like her, or is it like, I think I'm starting to change my schedule so that I get to see her.
Yeah.
Or I'm noticing that she's starting to change her schedule so that she gets to see me, and she's always inviting me out to go to breakfast after mass or whatever. Like, it's the different levels of relationship there that, like, how strong is the attraction? If it's just like, I think she's cute or whatever, or I know that she kind of likes me, back off just a little bit. Don't spend as much time, and go about your day.
Right.
Where if it's deeper, then you got to change a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And the reality is, in your ministry as a priest, like, women are going to come to you with very intimate and deep parts of their, sometimes there's a lot of marital troubles or problems with their kids, and so they're very vulnerable in those moments. And obviously, as men, as protectors, you want to help them and do the best for them. But then you have to also realize that, okay, there's certain things that here would be appropriate to do, inappropriate to do, and kind of discern, or how do I best help this person without becoming emotionally attached to this person, and feeding my own needs for intimacy in those moments as opposed to serving the other person.
Yeah, there's definitely an idea of like the spousal relationship between the priest and the church. I mean, we talk about it, often of the church as the bride of the priest. And you really kind of have to act that way when you're interacting with people, because even in a married relationship or any other relationship, you might find yourself at some point attracted to some other woman, or finding yourself getting kind of close to someone, and you kind of have to take those same steps of, is this healthy for my marriage? Is this healthy for me? Is this I think is leading towards a bad place. And so in a way, for the priest or the married man, you kind of have to do the same kind of questions and wondering and protection. Yeah.
I think a good litmus test too is think of yourself as a married man. Like, okay, if I have a wife and I'm spending all this time with this particular woman, how would my wife feel about that? And then go, well, I'm a priest. My wife is the church. How's the church going to feel about this if I'm spending all this time with her and not my children, my spiritual children? Yeah. And as a seminarian, it's kind of the same thing. Like, we're not priests yet, but you can still do the litmus test of, if I was married, and I kind of am starting to be married because we're all candidates in this room right now. Yep. Like, how does the church feel about this? How would a wife feel about this if I'm spending all this time with this particular woman?
Oh, absolutely.
Probably pretty jealous and pissed off.
So what are your all's personal experiences with kind of navigating these waters? I think we all have some friends or close friends who are women. How are your own personal experiences in navigating this?
We're talking pre or post entrance to seminary.
Well, let's start with pre, and then we can go to post. Yeah, let's start with like before you entered seminary. Maybe you were still kind of a discerning man. Maybe you were just still trying to fall in love with your faith. Like, how were your own relationships with women kind of before seminary, and then how did that change after going into it?
Yeah, for me, I think my first serious relationship was I dated a girl in high school for 3 years, and we met on a mission trip, and started off great, and by the end it turned into a very kind of physical and impure relationship, and I knew I needed to get out of it, and the Lord gave me some the grace I needed and the courage to change course, and I did. And then the next major relationship was in college, and this one I was like, all right, I'm going to do this right. We're going to be focused on the Lord. It's going to be a Christian relationship, and we're going to be discerning marriage in a intentional way. And that one lasted about a year, and went really well, and ended in a much more peaceful. And we actually discerned marriage in this case. Like, okay, like, Lord, what are you asking of us, and where are you calling us to be? And then for me, finally, the last major one was actually the one that pushed me into seminary. I was talking to this girl that I knew through this teaching program that I was doing, and I'd already been thinking about seminary for a couple of years, and I had this kind of internal wrestling with myself and with the Lord, and really felt attracted to this girl, and she was really felt attracted to this girl, and potentially called to date her, but also was wrestling with this desire for the priest. And at the end of the day, I realized I can't date this girl in good conscience until I first go to seminary. And so from that moment on, I kind of said, okay, all right, Lord, I'll give seminary a try, and if it doesn't work out, then maybe I'll come back to this. So that was my experience pre-seminary.
I was a pretty bad Catholic, so...
Say it isn't so, Seth. Say it isn't so.
I had a serious relationship with a girl for several years. It was not very healthy. And like with David, it was what you would imagine it would be. So for somebody who was not very strong in their faith.
So how's your views kind of changed after seminary formation and kind of where you are?
Putting me on the spot, man.
Open up your heart, Seth. Let's see it.
I wasn't in that mind space when I first went to seminary, but it was hard because that's what formation does. It starts to take those edges off. And it was a struggle to change how I saw women from, this is somebody who I find attractive and this is somebody who I see as a potential mate. or whatever. I don't know what
Potential mate.
I don't know, man.
The potential person.
Potential partner. Yeah. Well,
Wife.
well,
No. Just mate.
mate. Yeah.
Purely physical.
mate.
Okay. All right.
But as seminary went along, I mean, within the first year, it was like over because St. Joseph's they hammer home human formation. So it was like and you know yourself, like I'm a seminarian, I can't think this way anymore. So it's that process of changing how I thought about women, how I saw women, and going, okay, I can't see this person as a potential partner. I have to see them as a sister in Christ, and start to even change that from sister to daughter in Christ, because future priest.
Yeah.
For me, the 2 years before I entered seminary, I started dating this girl that I met at a student bill conference, actually.
Oh, wow.
And it was wonderful and actually really beautiful in a lot of ways. The main problem with that relationship was that we were both, like, I had been thinking about seminary for already, and she was thinking about religious life, and we would even like exchange discernment advice we had heard at some conference or something. We'd, I heard this really. Oh wow, that's really good. I'm going to use that.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean that was the main problem, and we couldn't discern in that relationship. It was beautiful in a lot of ways, and we talked about marriage a lot. But eventually it had to end because of those discernments that were unresolved for priesthood and religious life.
Mine's kind of similar. I had before seminary, I did not always have the best of relationships. I wasn't Catholic, and I found my faith and started really learning what the church talked about, and still really didn't get it. But I tried some relationships after I was Catholic. I went to seminary for 4 years and then stepped away from formation for a bit. And in that time after I stepped away, I met a lovely young woman. She had discerned for a while for religious life. I was a former seminarian. We met at a pro-life holy hour during the March for Life. Wow. I mean, it was great.
Checking all the boxes right
Oh,
now.
yeah. I mean, just absolutely just everything I could have been looking for. And we started dating, and we did everything right. I mean, that was the best thing. My relationships in the past had not been these pure relationships that they should have been. But I was so proud. Even now, I'm so proud of that relationship, because like we dated for about a year and a half. We did everything right, and we discerned well. I felt like we had discerned marriage properly, and we got rather close to this idea of, no, let's just get married. And it was in that discernment, it was in that relationship that we realized that the Lord was calling us to something, and it wasn't each other. She was being called to discern with the religious life more, and I was being called to go back to seminary. So we broke up amicably, and we've remained really good friends since then. So I can only say that while my relationships with women have definitely changed after seminary, and now I'm back in, they're still changing. They're definitely changing for the better. I have much better relationships with women now, I think, than I had before I went in.
I'm going to put James on the spot, but
Oh, yeah.
this girl who she went to go discern the Carmelites, right?
I don't know what religious community. When we broke up, she didn't have a religious community in mind.
Well, I think me and James, his first year at St. Joseph's, he was there my last year, and so he told this story, and so we just every time we would see James, we would go, "Hey, how's your Carmelite girlfriend doing?" He's like, "Oh yeah, she's okay, she's discerning well."
Oh my goodness, that's great.
So now I get to ask you the same thing, Tyler.
She's very good. She actually just recently discerned out.
Okay.
So she's now trying to figure out, and that's one of the beautiful things is that now she's still trying to figure out. She doesn't know if she's left the idea of religious or religious life entirely. She's still trying to pray about it, but she's definitely, for me, it's one of the wonderful things about having relationships with women. In seminary, we have relationship with tons of guys, and we all have like that guy way of thinking, and we all think kind of similarly, and you can have these great relationships. But when it comes to having a friendship with women, they definitely see things differently. They react to things differently. They understand things differently. And so her discerning out and then what she's going to do now and how she's doing is really inspiring for me. It's really great for me to see is just how she's handling that and then what she's doing and still that devotion of herself to something else. So she's doing great. Yeah.
I mean, that's important too. Something just to touch on something that you just said is that God did create us man and woman. So it is good for us to have women in our lives because they do see things differently.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the secretary thing, I mean, it doesn't have to be your secretary, but just you may have a problem, like in marriage counseling, like you don't know what the woman's going to think because you're not a woman.
Yeah.
We don't think how they think.
Yeah.
So to have a close friend who you go to, hey, like, I got these couple and he's talking about this and I understand his perspective, but hers, I don't, can you help me with this? Because I don't really understand.
One thing I heard a priest mention once when asked about like relationships with women is he said that whenever he like goes into the office, like the ladies in the parish office, they still complement his masculinity. Their femininity still complements his masculinity.
Yeah.
Even though it's not, I mean, it's not a romantic kind of relationship at all.
Yeah.
But there's still that complementarity there between the male and the female, even for the celibate.
Yep.
Definitely. It is really good, seeing these relationships because I know a lot of priests that end up with women that they're somewhat close to in like the office or if they're in a school or something, and it really helps because I see them very often. They'll go up to them and just like, I need advice on this, or I need to talk to you about this because it's just something that I'm not familiar and I need to know something. And I think that's a great thing for a priest to be able to recognize that someone might be able to see something in a little bit of a different light than he does, and really be able to open up and ask about that. It's just important to have. So last thing to kind of talk about here, we've talked about kind of our relationships, kind of like as we're in seminary, the ones kind of beforehand. One of the things that we're going to be doing a lot of after being ordained is working with women, especially you talk about them in the office. We're going to be ministering to them. And so how does it look for you, your relationships with working with women, interacting with them, especially on a daily basis, and still living out your priestly celibacy? And having good relationships with women. Like, so for instance, I know a priest who was speaking once to us about priests do very different things when they can sometimes, and when they interact with women, people who aren't as well formed, or maybe they're still a little nervous about interacting with women, and it can manifest in different ways. So
you'll see that in seminary too.
Oh, yes.
Some guys are terrified of speaking with women.
Oh yeah. So this priest said that you either end up kind of bitter towards them, or you end up eccentric. Like you either kind of bitter and you kind of keep them at arm's length, or you're just a little crazy enough that you keep that separation that way. So how is it that you have? So how do you think that you can kind of imagine from what you've learned, what you've experienced, in having those good relationships and keeping those healthy boundaries, especially with the women that you're going to be working with in the ministries and in your churches?
I mean, I think the first thing is just to treat them like another person.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
shocker.
That's the first thing.
Revolutionary.
Because, I mean, we're all people, so don't treat them any differently than you would treat anybody else.
The dynamic's a little different too, in terms of running a parish office is different than normal business. Like, so in one way, they're going to see you as the boss and the leader of the company, but you're also a spiritual father to these people as well. And so you're not only concerned for how well is what are the numbers of the parish looking like, but you're also concerned about the welfare of their soul. And so I know several priests who encourage them to go to daily mass and adoration, and make sure they're getting fed spiritually, and pouring into them in that way. And also, I think when you keep your parish staff on a common mission oriented, all right, we're here for the salvation of souls. Like when you're working towards a common goal and you're united in that purpose, I think the personal relationship aspect of it will naturally kind of find the right calibration and balance between, okay, these are our individual relationships as people, but also we're on a mission as a parish to evangelize and to lead people to Christ.
Yep. And I think that's a good point too, is as the priest, yes, you are the pastor. You are the one mainly in charge of the salvation of souls for that. Well, you're not in charge of salvation of souls. Jesus is ultimately, but you know what I mean.
Co-worker. Yeah.
Co-worker. You're co-worker with Jesus. You and Jesus are, you can't see me, but I'm holding my finger and my close together. We're like this. But then to remind the parish staff that they are also part of this mission to help save the souls within this parish boundary.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's tough for a lot of times in their roles when you get caught in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Especially the parish secretary and the finance director, you know, it's easy to get lost in, okay, this is my kind of secular worldly task, but how do I do this for the salvation of souls?
I've got all these numbers to look at every day. How's this saving souls? It is, but it's hard to find how it is, but it is.
So for each of us, I mean, do you have any advice to maybe a young man who's discerning the idea of going to seminary? And might be a little bit nervous about how his relationship with women might change in regards to, oh, I'm going to this, everything's changing. Like, so what advice might you have for someone who's thinking about seminary, especially in regards to his relationship with women?
Yeah, I know for me at least one of my fears was, because I'm giving up this emotional intimacy and physical intimacy with a wife by entering a seminary and wanting to become a priest. One of my fears was, okay, can I be fulfilled and happy and at peace with my decision? And I've come to realize that the Lord and His goodness and His grace will give you all that you need. Will give you the support system. Will give you the friends. Will give you the mentors, and the ministry itself will too fill you up and will provide. And so my advice to maybe an aspiring seminarian will be to trust the Lord, trust that in His plans for you, and trust that He'll give you all the graces that you need in order to live this celibacy really well.
I think as Seth mentioned earlier, it can be helpful as you're beginning to discern and you're beginning to talk to the vocations office and these kinds of things, to start thinking of the women in your life, the friends that you have who are women. Start to think of them as sisters in Christ, because you're living in the world. You're thinking as men think, and you're thinking of women as potential mates still, very likely, and so.
I love that word.
Potential wife material.
Potential wife. Yeah. And so, start changing that thinking into, okay, they're a spiritual sister. How is their soul? How are they doing? I think that's the beginning of the way of thinking, the change in thinking.
Yep. Kind of going off that, practically, don't be stupid. If you're gonna start discerning, if you're thinking about seminary, then maybe stop dating. That's one of the ways to start discerning it. Yeah. And if you're in a physical relationship with a girl, stop it. Yeah. You should be living a chaste life. You're a Christian. You should be living a chaste life anyway. But, if you're going to start discerning, you got to definitely start living a chaste life. And also, just a little bit more, if you get to seminary and say you do fall in love or you do have a crush on somebody, the most important thing is to, one, tell your spiritual director and to talk to your friends about it. Mm-hmm. Don't hold that in your heart and don't keep it to yourself, because when you start having secrets, that's when things get really, really bad.
Yeah, don't keep secrets in seminary, man. That stuff festers. It's not healthy. But I agree with that. Definitely, even if you're in seminary and you start developing feelings for someone, or you start thinking that you're developing, that's like, oh, well, I have feelings for someone, that means I shouldn't be in seminary. Mm-hmm. That can still happen just as a discerning guy. Like, you're discerning. I remember when I was first discerning, meeting a young woman and being like, oh, she's amazing, I could totally leave this for her. That would be something. But that doesn't mean that, oh, I'm not called to this, or I'm not called to do that. It's still definitely, the only way you're going to figure that out is that's a conversation between you and Jesus, and you need to pray and live as a good Christian man, and you'll get it figured out.
One thing I heard one time was God may ask you to leave seminary to marry, for marriage in general. God will not ask you to leave seminary to marry this woman. Like when the woman of your dreams shows up your first year of seminary, God does not want you to leave seminary and marry her.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
He may, after discerning the priesthood, having a thorough, fruitful discernment, you discern God is not calling me to the priesthood. Then you can go and explore marriage. But he is not asking you to leave for this particular woman.
Mm-hmm. Now, our last thing before we end this, what advice would you have for women interacting with seminarians? Well, I mean, if you could give a simple piece of advice for women interacting with seminarians, interacting with priests, or anyone who's even just discerning, what would you say? For all of our women listeners who are going to be listening to this.
Stay away.
Get behind me, Satan. No.
And that's going to be cut.
What advice would you have? What would you say to someone about how to have a good either working relationship or personal just relationship?
You know, I think it just treat them like a person, but treat them kind of like a married person. Like treat them as if they are your friend and they're married to somebody else. Mm-hmm. So treat them as you would your friends who are married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the best advice. Like you can be friends with them, you can hang out with them, but at some point it's like, okay, this person is already taken, and you have that in the back of your mind, because we have that in the back of our minds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously important to pray for the men who are discerning their vocations, and I think the women can be a great source of prayer and emotional support for us too. And men are always looking for for something to lay their life down for, and so just seeing the men that they're discerning this call to lay down their life completely and totally for the Lord, and to encourage them and support them in whatever ways they can.
And if you are a woman listening to this and you're not a mother because your son wants to go to seminary, you're a young woman who has not discerned a vocation, or an older woman, either way, start to pray about your vocation now. Like, ask God to help lead you where it is he wants you to go. Maybe he wants you to discern a religious life. Maybe he wants you to be married. Maybe he wants you to become a consecrated virgin. I don't know, but God knows. So start praying about it now.
Oh, yeah.
And ask your seminarians who you see throughout the diocese, Tyler Starkey, James Grossheim, David Lee, Seth Reed, so on and so forth. Ask them to pray for you when you see them, and say, hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Ask them to pray for you.
My only real thing to add here is also just be patient. Be patient, especially when working with seminarians, especially in like new priests who are still learning how to navigate these waters. We don't get as much training on this as you would think, though we do get quite a lot. It's never enough to just you just go into a parish and you figure it out. Mm-hmm. So have patience with your clergy, with your seminarians as we still learn this. So
especially the new seminarians and the new priests.
Yeah,
the new priests have been formed pretty well, but some of them may still feel a little awkward. But the new seminarians have not been formed at all.
Yep.
They are gonna
They
are gonna be kind of stupid, and that's okay. But just put kid gloves on when you deal with them, especially if you work in the church. Because then they may think, like, some seminarians, they may come from a household that's like, oh, the man is always the most important in society. The man is always important. And they may have a problem working with a woman. Just treat them with kids' gloves. And if you have to put them in their place, put them in their place.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid to put the seminarian in his place if he is stupid.
Gentle correction. Correction's good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode of the Nashville Vocations Podcast. Have a great day, and God bless.
This has been an adaptation of the Nashville Vocations Podcast for Nashville Catholic Radio in conjunction with the Vocations Office of the Diocese of Nashville. Shining the light of our Catholic faith in everyday life. This is Nashville Catholic Radio, 100.5 FM, and streaming at nashvillecr.com. And streaming on the Nashville Catholic Radio app.